This is Creepy and Geeky. Hey, all you creeps and geeks. I'm your host, Robert, and today is episode 4 in my Friday the 13th series of episodes. On today's episode, we'll be talking about part 7, The New Blood, and part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. And joining me on this discussion is Dev Elson. Dev is the co-host of ChuckyVision, a podcast exploring the Child's Play franchise, and also the co-host of Forever Friday, a podcast that explores the Friday the 13th series 13 minutes at a time. Welcome to the show, Dev.
Hi, it's an honor to be here. I've been listening to the pod getting ready for this, and it's a great time.
Oh, all right, great. I appreciate that. I have a lot of fun making it, and I hope those people who listen will also enjoy it. I'm glad you have enjoyed what you've listened to so far.
Yeah, you're pretty far into the Friday franchise now. How's that been?
It's been pretty fun. I've had some good guests on to talk about all the episodes so far. This should be another fun episode. These movies, particularly, they are the post Jason Lives. So he's become what we kind of know about Jason at this point. When we look back at Jason, at least for myself, especially being a child of the 80s, when I look back at Jason, I think of him as the unstoppable killing machine kind of character that he is. But that didn't really start until number 6. So
Only took 6 films to get the Jason we know.
Yeah. But we're now post 6. We're into number 7. We're starting with The New Blood, and in this one, we have the conceit of Jason versus Carrie in a way. Why don't you tell us a little bit? What are your thoughts on number 7?
Yeah, when you think about how long it took Jason to become Jason, some would argue once we've got that, it should be smooth sailing. And yet, the films from 7 onwards are really the studio realizing we have no idea where to go with this franchise, but we've got to keep going.
Right.
And generally, from what I've seen, from what I've heard of fans throughout the years, Part 7 New Blood gets kind of a bad rap, but I think that's mainly because it's coming off of the really good Part 6. And Part 7
Right.
is, in many ways, not as strong as Part 6. It's kind of a weak version of Part 6, but I think there's a lot to enjoy in this film.
Yeah. Upon rewatching, and it had been a little bit, a couple of years since I'd rewatched all of these previously. And I had kind of blazed through them before. And now getting a chance to kind of sit and watch these again and thinking about them, especially in terms of the other movies in the franchise, that this one, I can see where it gets its bad rep from following number 6, because number 6 was such a strong movie that following it was going to be hard to do. But this one definitely has some fun moments. It's fairly tame in terms of gore. Like very tame. It smacks of studio editing more than anything else. They cut a lot of that out, and which is indicative of Paramount in general throughout this series, is that they really neutered it, which is always funny. And I've mentioned it on other episodes. It's always funny when looking back at this, we think of Friday the 13th as this very gory series, and it's not at all. Most of the kills are very tame, and a lot of the gore is off screen. So you don't really get to see a lot.
Yes, it's an odd franchise with the gore because the first couple films do have really imaginative kills, and they are
Yeah.
kind of bloody. You do see blood, but but for Paramount, as the sequels kept going, and they really needed that money, the box office, the MPAA were just smashing them every time. They were just like, if you want to make part seven, if you want to make part eight, then you're going to play by our rules. It's going to have no blood
Right.
whatsoever. And I think the biggest problem with some of these kills are the really good ones, the early ones by like Tom Savini and the other artists back then, is when if you have to cut out the blood and guts, then you still have most of a good kill. Like the sleeping bag one in this.
Yeah. Yes.
They were smacked up against the tree 5 or 6 times, and that was all cut down to just one smash.
Right.
And cutting that down is fine because you still get what the kill is. There are some kills in these later ones where people just get stabbed in the stomach, and
Yeah.
without the blood, it's such a boring kill.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, yeah, that's what's the interesting thing too. Like you said, those first movies they had some interesting kills, and it's like, but by the time this one rolls around, they've gotten very, very boring. The kills, like, because I mean, and that's what's frustrating even too, because I know that they were trying to the filmmakers were trying to do interesting kills and interesting moments for that, but because they get pushed to being off screen in the editing, that what you see is definitely nothing. It's just some of the most boring stuff uh in terms of, and that's what's weird about the reputation that Friday the 13th has as a series, is I believe most people are probably imagining it more like one and two, and that's the same for me. Going back on this, I like, I could have swore there were better kills. um and that's speaking to um that the sleeping bag kill is an interesting kill, but it's so neutered until they do it again in Jason X, and it becomes a much better kill for them, because New Line is just like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go for that. So
Yeah,
it's so
at this
bizarre.
yeah, at this point, they should be expecting the MPAA to
Yeah.
stomp down on them, and so they need to design kills. And I think they did for a couple of these films. They need to design kills that even without the blood are still really good, because
Yes.
like there's a really fun build up with one of these characters who gets killed where and you're talking about the repetition and lack of imagination. Out of nowhere, Jason comes out with it's like a hedge trimmer. It's like a buzz saw
Yes.
on a
Yes.
stick, like an elongated chainsaw. Pulls that out of nowhere, and you're thinking, oh wow, that's going to be a really good kill. But without the blood, all he does is just put it towards the person, and then
Right.
it cuts away. And so it's just a letdown if you don't
Yeah.
plan around that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what's funny too, is like, because Paramount had no confidence in these movies at all. They kept pumping them out because each one would do well, surprisingly, especially given the fact that these kills were so tame and everything. But people kept going back for these. Every movie kept doing well up until number 8 didn't do as well as they had hoped. But this franchise defined the 80s. I mean, we're ending right here with number 8. The Paramount series ends with number 8 here, and it went from 1980 to 1989, 8 movies in not in those 10 years. And it's amazing what they did within that franchise in this time period. Um, and these two movies, 7 and 8, they do seem to be like, okay, well, we've got undead Jason back now, and or and we're just putting him into these weird scenarios now. They're still continuing the story to a degree, but they're introducing these new elements. Like with this one, they're introducing this girl who's got psychic abilities, telekinesis, and and I guess some kind of precognition type stuff. She's seen things, and so she, but she has this incident with her father where she kills her father by knocking the dock down around him as he's yelling at her while she's on a boat. And there's but it's around the same time as Jason is under the water. Apparently it's right around the same time as he'd been dragged under by Tommy Jarvis in number 6. And so he's down below, and then 10 years later we get her as a teenager, and she accidentally resurrects Jason, thinking it's her father who's under the water this whole time. So it's weird. The timeline is so funky too, because I was looking it up, and by this point we should be, at least with the way the timeline works, is I think by this point we are well into the 2000s, the early 2000s with the timeline. So it's real funky, especially because obviously it was made in the 80s, so the fashion and everything else is all very 80s.
Oh god, yeah. I adore looking up the timeline for Friday the 13th because it's just so funny. Every screenwriter of each subsequent film writing in, and then this happens to someone when they're a little girl. Cut forward 10 years later, and they never consider what that means by cutting forward in time. So all of these cut forwards add up, and you end up like 20 years in the future.
Well, that's what's funny to me about it too, is that, if you were to make a movie in the early 2000s, like, okay, say, Freddy versus Jason, that one came out in 2003. We are now 20 years later, in 2023, and which is crazy to think about. But the fashion and technology have somewhat moved forward, but I would say for the most part, looking back on 2003 isn't much different than today on 2023. Things haven't changed that much in the way people look and act and all that. So it's if you did something where you moved it forward within that decade, it wouldn't be so out of the ordinary. But thinking about how, looking back on this series and seeing how they tried to basically say it was 20 years past the time of the first movie, and it just doesn't quite match up because 80s fashions and technology and everything had not moved forward enough to to show us that. So, and plus at that point, like, they would have said, we would have thought our technology was much farther along at that point if it was really in the 2000s. So
we can just see that the glam rocker check in part 8. That's just retro.
Yes.
No.
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
off the time.
And it's funny. Go ahead.
I know this was part 9 and part 10, but I do believe the timeline does end up correcting itself somehow. I think part 9 and even part 8 are set like a year before Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, it's one of those weird things where we get Jason Goes to Hell, and in real life we don't get another movie for a decade. But in this universe, I think he only goes to hell for like 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what's I think that because there was such a distance between Goes to Hell and Freddy versus Jason, that because of that 10-year gap, that the timeline has a chance to catch up to itself.
They wanted part 7 to be Freddy versus Jason, way
Yeah,
back in
yeah,
1988. And that's how
yep,
long it took for them just to get the rights.
yeah. As I watch these, I of course take notes and look at the trivia behind these, and they tried with both of these. Both of these were attempted to try to, um, you know, before they got to script stage, of course, but they did try to incorporate Freddy into these movies. They were trying real hard. I think just because Freddy was becoming such a huge
Mm.
icon at the time, and that Jason was deep into his series at that point. They're like, well, let's try to bring him in, and so they did try for 20 years to or at least 15 years to pull him in, but
Ironically,
yeah.
all it really took was for these two movies to perform so badly that they had to sell Jason to New Line.
Exactly. Yeah, instead of trying to untangle the rights, or to share the rights with New Line, they were just like, all right, fine, we'll just sell it to you, we don't care anymore.
You guys do it.
But this one, the number 7, getting back to number 7, is an interesting one because we are we have this girl who is a psychic, and really being pushed hard by her doctor to uh really tap into these psychic abilities, and he keeps threatening to take her back to the hospital. You're going to go back to the hospital if you don't do what I want. It's like, God forbid she doesn't perform these psychic abilities for you. um and I always find it interesting too that when I see him, I always remember that he's Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes.
I'm like, well, at least he gets his due, yeah.
Yeah, that made me think when you said before about putting Jason in different and weird situations. This actress, God bless Law Pink Lincoln, but Law
Yes.
Park Lincoln, because she is acting in a different movie than the rest of the cast. She is really going for it. And
Yeah.
everyone else is literally just partying for the entire movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny too. I think both of these movies feel more like 80s movies than, because by that point, 80s style and fashion and everything, it kind of solidified into this kind of big hair, kind of chunky clothing, style that we associate with the 80s. And this so these two feel very of that time period more than uh the earlier ones do as well, but they've always felt more like the the not so glamorous 80s. And so I was kind of laugh at these two, especially being a child of the 80s, that it's just such a weird time.
Yeah, there's a
um
real charm to the first few, how late 70s they are.
yes,
The
yeah,
80s
exactly.
ness is very muted in the like up to 5.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd say, yeah, yeah, definitely six to eight definitely are this like weird little late 80s trilogy of movies. It's so funny the way the movies kind of overlap in their little trilogies, or whatever, because we get these the first three are kind of their own storyline, but 2, 3, and 4 are specifically a trilogy of movies that all happen within like a couple of days of each other, like all within the same week. 2, 3, and 4 all happen. um and then 4, 5, and 6 are the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, but then 6, 7, and 8 are also this weird like late 80s zombie Jason trilogy. And it's just it's fun to watch these and like this, and to kind of examine them as this whole, but also these little different parts of each other and how they connect and cross over and everything, because they did try to, at least up until number 6, and even number 7, I think they did try to hold a narrative consistency. They were trying to push the storyline forward each time. They with each different writer and director that they got with all of these, they each tried to do their own little thing, but they were trying to hold something together. Um, they weren't very successful at it, but
Well, it's the very odd thing, and I give them credit because with part six, they nailed Jason. And
yes,
really, they could have done what they did with the first few films and just have Jason going around camp just killing teenagers. The next few films could have been just complete copies. And instead,
yes,
they were like, each film has to have something new. Each film, we have to, the writers were challenging themselves, trying to think of new concepts.
yeah,
And they've also got a balance with what people expect, like gore and partying and nudity and all that. And I think Seven does a pretty decent job at introducing new elements like the whole Carrie thing, and then still
right.
having the whole elements of it, it being a Friday the 13th film where teenagers get killed. It is probably the only disappointment is it really is just a Friday the 13th film until the third act, and then she starts
Yes,
using her powers properly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the. But once it hits that third act, it becomes this interesting, fun mix of a movie, which they hadn't done before, and so that does make it a lot more fun. And then we get Jason unmasked for a good portion of the movie,
Mm.
and it's a scary Jason. It's that the design work that they did on that face is to me some excellent work. It's creepy and and scary in a way that him with the mask uh doesn't accomplish. So I think it's a fun look at him there that we don't really get in any of the other movies.
Absolutely. I think part seven has one of the most fun finales. And also, I
Yes.
think this might be the best Jason. This might be part six. Part six, writing wise, was the best introduction to this Jason, the Jason we all know and love. But I think design wise and even acting wise with Kane Hodder, this is the
Yes.
best Jason. Like the spine and the ribs, just the way he is rotting, but still so strong. And like you said, the design of his face, it really makes him distinct from Michael Myers, which is always the problem with these two masked dudes just going around killing
Right.
people. Like, what is the difference? And Michael always kind of has a real laid back, like you don't know what's
Yeah.
going on inside his head. But Kane Hodder really brings a lot to this
Oh yeah.
non-speaking character when that mask comes off. Just from his eye, just from his one good eye, like you just see how pissed Jason is. Jason like
Yeah.
wants to kill these people badly.
Yeah. Jason is like pure rage. Um that seems to define his motivation. He's pissed at these kids who keep coming into his campground, and he's just he saw his mother killed by one of them and is just like constantly like, no, you all have to die. You all keep coming into my area, and I'm gonna keep killing you till you all leave. And it's so funny too, because we get to number 8, and then he leaves Crystal Lake, which is an interesting concept. And we're not jumping fully into it yet, but I just think it's interesting that they finally take him out of that, and because he's chasing some of these kids, and it's just that's his motivation. He's going to kill these kids until they're all dead, and it doesn't matter where he needs to go to get them. So I think that's a and as opposed to Michael, where Michael is just killing people, and like you said, he's kind of laid back. He just kind of quiet and just kind of walks, whereas like Jason always seems to just be like stalking and quickly stalking. um it's interesting, the dichotomy between the two stalker like characters.
Yeah, I think one of the best things Hodder really brought to him was the brutality. So
Yeah.
even if the kills weren't gory or great, like the in part 8, there's a great one with Kelly Hugh,
Yes.
that character. That's not a violent, or well, it's not a gory kill, but just the
Right.
fact that it's that one shot where he just the way he disposes of the body, he just slams her down on the ground.
Yeah.
Like once he's done with people, he just throws their bodies to the side. He's done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think Kane Hodder brought something new and different to the character that hadn't been like Jason was brutal before, but this new undead Jason is just you know out for pure vengeance, and he will do it in every brutal way that he can. And like you say, yeah, because a lot of it has to be done off screen and everything. He's doing things with his physicality that just show that he is a monster unleashed, and unleashed by life, because he no longer can be fully killed at this point.
Mm.
So
And
it's an injury. Go
I
ahead.
remember reading that yeah, Kane Hodder really does talk to the directors and the cameramen and stuff when doing this. Like he'll say when something Jason wouldn't do something, like if he stumbles over or something, like don't show Jason doing these things, because you see that in the first ones when Jason is alive, Jason is almost like Ghostface. He stumbles around a lot,
Yeah.
doesn't he? And
Yeah.
he falls over and he's quite ungraceful, and you don't get that with modern Jason now. Like once Jason became undead, then he was unshakable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that is something interesting that I noticed this time through, is just the Jason from 1 through 4, or from 2 through 4, is he's very human. He's very he can be hurt. He gets hurt quite a bit. He keeps going. He's kind of running on that pure adrenaline at that point, and he keeps going. He gets hurt bad, but he keeps going until he is finally stopped. But in between that, he does get hurt quite a bit, and it does slow him down. Whereas this time, like, it doesn't matter what you throw at him, he keeps getting up and he keeps coming at after them. And he gets a porch dropped on him, and he gets knocked down some stairs and through the stairs, and he keeps coming. Nothing stops him.
Yeah, he
um
takes a couch and then a severed head in a potted plant.
yeah. Yeah, there's some fun stuff, especially in number 7, that is just like, you know, it's just this one definitely does not get a lot of due, but it is definitely a more fun. I think that, you know, like you said, it's that last third act that really is, once Jason and I think Tina square off, and she starts using her psychic abilities more, that it becomes a fun throwdown, uh, and something that up until this point we hadn't really seen in a movie like this, in a slasher like this. So it was a fun mix to bring that into the Friday the 13th universe.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That you only see it a couple times in the future now for Jason, with like Freddy versus Jason and a little bit with Jason X. They should have really like zoned in on this. Like we've got a character that can't die, so let's really pile on the damage. And
Yeah.
in the next few films, they sort of just go back to what they did before, where Jason just stalks around chasing people. Like he you know, hit him with a truck, hit him with a
Yeah.
train, give him the damage. Like keep having let him keep getting up, and taking damage, and then still going. Like that's the a good appeal of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that that's kind of what is fun about these latter movies, is that you do have this unstoppable, unshakable killing machine. That, yeah, I agree, they should have been doing more of that. And that I think they could have had a lot of fun with that. Now, to be fair, I guess number 8 didn't do that well in that regard. But I think part of that is um part of the ending of 8, which feels weirdly off to me. But the rest of the movie is really fun, and has a lot of good moments, even though it does take an hour for them to get to New York, um, which was not what the screenwriter wanted. He did want them to get there sooner, and he wanted a lot more action going on at different New York landmarks, but they didn't have the budget for it because Paramount was just not giving it up. They had no confidence in these movies anymore, and this was obvious, very obvious throughout this
Yeah,
movie.
I can't wait for Scream 6. I hope that is just the
Yeah,
same thing. It's Ghostface on a boat for an hour.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully, Scream 6 will redeem the Jason Takes Manhattan a little bit. Give us a slasher in the city amongst the landmarks and stuff, and it'll hopefully be a lot more fun in that regard. But yeah, it's Jason Takes Manhattan is interesting. We get him on a boat headed from Crystal Lake into New York, which is weird because, like people have pointed out, how does this lake have a have a throughway to the Atlantic Ocean? Um, but push that aside, and then we get the fun of him stalking most of the class on the boat, and just slaughtering them all.
Yeah, I don't enjoy I don't enjoy this film as much as I did Seven. I think
Yeah,
I champion Seven, whereas it's kind of odd because a lot of people have complaints about Part Eight, and Friday the 13th is one of those franchises where you watch it with friends. You watch it in a group, and you can kind of talk over the boring parts, and you can laugh at the
right.
fun parts and stuff. So I think I've watched this movie several times, and I think that every time it's been like that, except for here, where I watched it on my
Yeah,
own. I think watching it on my own, I mean, of all the sequels, this one did not need to be 1 hour 40. And it shows at times it's just nothing is happening at times. I enjoy when stuff is happening. Jason on a boat, there's fun kills, there's fun characters, but there's long stretches where this could have been shortened.
yeah. A lot of the exposition with the lead girl in this, Rennie, she she's got a lot of backstory. She has some kind of like she's afraid to get in the water, so she's afraid to swim. And it goes back to it ends up going back to her uncle throwing her into Crystal Lake, and telling her you want to make sure you can swim because you don't want to get taken by Jason, blah blah blah. And so again, we get this weird backstory of this character who had some kind of possible run-in with Jason, although it's unclear. I'm assuming it was more panic, and she thought she saw Jason in the water.
Yeah.
But it's just they keep trying to tie all this stuff to these girls in these two movies specifically. They try to tie this weird history of Jason um into their own stories, rather than just being like, okay, well, it's just Jason, like, being Jason. um and I think that's what
Yeah.
bogs this movie down. It's just that weird exposition, this weird, like, this girl's just troubled, and she's just like, and after having just dealt with the last one, it feels very samey. We just had that with this
Yeah.
last one, and we don't have the extra, like, interesting bit of her being psychic like we did in the last one.
No, she
So
is basically Tina, that she has psychic
yeah,
visions, but then they're not real. Like she doesn't
yeah,
have powers. She's just imagining little boy Jason like swimming up to the window like a bunch of
right.
times or coming out of the mirror.
Yeah, it's yeah, it felt really weird to have this kind of back to back, you know, and for this one to be just like, well, and there's the thing too, is that I believe I read that they did actually want to bring Tina back for this one.
Mm.
But Lara Park Lincoln wanted more money, rightfully so. And she wanted to raise. She was coming back for the sequel. And they didn't want to pay her. And so they had to kind of tweak what they did. And so I think that's probably why we ended up getting a very samey character in this, that we and but then they had to take out all the psychic stuff because she wasn't the same girl. And so, like, I get why they did that, but at the same time, you can recast if you wanted to use the same character. Just recast her and just whatever. They did it with Patricia Arquette
Yeah.
in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. So uh
I mean, they did it
but
with Tommy Jarvis.
yeah.
Twice.
Three different Tommy Jarvises, so within the same franchise. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even consider that, which was really great because the one in number 5 was boring. um but yeah, I do like, as much as it does suck that it's like one location, and they played it out for far too long. I do like the idea of Jason stalking and killing people on this boat, making it more of a kind of like a you know uh, a murder mystery type thing on a ship, because nobody seems to find any of the bodies, like, um right away. Like, he's able to kill a bunch of these people and just nobody knows. So it's kind of funny in that way.
Yeah, that is always the formula of Jason. He just wanders around killing whoever he bumps into, and
Right.
it was odd in part 7 how you got these passages of time, like, oh, it was the next day, and then, oh, it's the next night.
Yeah.
What's Jason doing in the time? He's just walking around doing nothing.
Yeah.
At least with this one, it's like one night. He kills a bunch of
Yeah.
people in one night, so that sort of makes sense, and there's a good sense of pacing to that. But yeah, Jason is fun, and there's fun side characters like the Rocket Chick or Kelly Hugh, but then, like, those, Julius gets quite a bit of screen time and he's fun, but like the main cast, you've got the main girl Renee. I've got nothing against these
There's
actors, but like the main girl Renee, like, you get all these flashbacks of like Jason and stuff, which the screenwriter said was he was trying to explore Jason's past, but we don't really get anything new other than the
Yeah.
fact that he was a kid who drowned.
Yeah.
And and then you've got the love interest, the boy. I mean, the love interest in the part 7, there wasn't much to him. But I mean, in this
No.
one, he's just so boring. He's just the captain's son, and I don't know how much he even knows about doing, like, driving a boat, because he
Yeah.
never stands up for himself. Like, there's like
No.
one moment where he's sort of like, he's like, listen, sir, I'm the captain and I'm going to take charge. Jason's real. And he's never seen Jason yet. And he's like, I believe this girl. Jason is real. Like,
Yeah.
why is he here? And then, like, the main guy, the Uncle Charles, I get why he's here. He's like Dr. Cruz. He is the asshole of
Yeah.
the cast. But he's such an asshole the entire
Yeah.
film.
Oh yeah, constantly. Like, like when they're stuck on the lifeboat and he's just like being a huge dick. Oh, I thought you knew what you like. Shut up. You don't know anything either. You know, you're being completely unhelpful to the situation. Like, shut
The,
up.
yeah, the absolutely most infuriating part of his character is near the end, when you've got all these moments where he's just shouting and bickering at people for like no reason, like people just talking to Renee, and he comes in, he's like, don't talk to her, like,
Yeah.
go away. And then later in the film, two men at gunpoint kidnap her, presumably for terrible reasons. And then he just stands there and he's like, no, we shouldn't go after him. They've got guns. Let's go call the
Yeah.
police. Like,
Uh,
why are you making the worst decisions every time?
yeah, no, he's just a terrible person. And yeah, Rennie and the boyfriend, her love interest or whatever, are just boring. That's the greatest thing, is that like they get rid of some of the more interesting characters early. Like you said, the rocker chick, Kelly Hu's character, they get rid of them way too early, and they're the more
Even the
interesting characters.
Yeah, even the blonde bully, who is basically the same as Melissa from part seven, but it's like the same
Yes,
character.
yes,
Even her, as soon as they do that really weird and fun blackmail scene, they just kill her off. And
yeah,
like Melissa was fun in part seven. She lasted most of the film, and then she got a really fun kill of the axe to the face, and then just get
yes,
discarded
yeah.
over the TV. This bully chick doesn't really get a great death either at all. She just gets disposed of,
No,
and then that's it.
and she's such a caricature of like she's got like no like motivation other than just being like the bitch.
Yeah, I don't
And
understand her reasoning at all. Like, she
no,
gets caught doing coke.
yeah,
Renee makes no inclinations that she's going to knock on them. And this girl is like, she might tell someone, so let's push her off the boat.
yeah, yeah, we're just gonna like actually commit murder. Like it went from 0 to 60 on her for like no reason at all. It's like one thing like if you're gonna bully somebody, but it's another thing if you're gonna actually toss them off the boat to kill them.
I don't even know what the blackmail is for. She
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
like not well, it's not even a hot. It's like nothing happens. She just kisses the teacher, Uncle Charles, for a bit, and then that's caught
right,
on camera. But I'm not sure
yeah,
what that's for.
yeah.
Grades?
Yeah,
The
maybe like she
drugs?
must be yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's so the writing on this is so interestingly weird. That they there's the characters are so paper thin for the movie that's probably I think the longest out of these original eight. There's not a lot going on. There's the them in the lifeboat scene goes on way too long.
Mm.
There's no reason for it to be going on as long as it did. That to show I guess passage of time, but like it seems like it's only a couple of hours at best that they're rowing, but they make it seem like it's like days. And meanwhile Jason's been like swimming along with them the whole time. um
But I mean, it's one thing for Jason to swim around for that long, but Julius gets thrown off the boat and he's swimming around for like 20 minutes before he gets saved.
yeah,
What's he been doing out there in the water this whole time?
yeah, oh my god, the narrative inconsistencies with this movie is just baffling.
Yeah, it feels like, and this is kind of what really disappoints me about this film is that and it's weird because it's a good contrast to part seven because so much of part
Yes,
seven is formulaic, really. It's the paper thin characters, partiers, teenagers. You got to have sex before you die. A lot of it is
right,
tropey, but
yes,
like it's fun, and a lot of the inconsistencies in this movie are like it just feels like, oh, it's a movie. Like, don't think too hard about it.
yeah,
Because it's
yeah,
like this is
it's
a tiny nitpick, but like, did you notice how weird it was when the two people at the start, the one of the boy comes out and he comes out with the Jason mask, but it's not just a hockey mask; it is Jason's mask because it has all the
has the cut
damage
in it,
that
yeah.
it has all the damage that the previous ones have. So what?
Yeah, yeah, it's very weird. It is so this yeah, because it's not like Jason had become this cultural phenomenon character like Ghostface does in the Scream movies. um it's it's such a weird thing, like Jason had not become that, so why would that mask exist in that form? Yeah, it's
Yeah, it only happens because they wanted the same mask. Just in the same
yeah,
way, when they try to call for help, Jason just knows how a ship's navigate like a communications
yeah, he
works.
pulls just
And
the right wires, yeah.
yeah. How does he even? I wouldn't know what that was. How does Jason know what that is?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, maybe Jason was going around and pulling all the wires. We don't know.
He was just making sure.
Yeah, he's just, we only saw him do those, and that just happened to be right at the right time. Yeah. Um, yeah, yeah. This movie's just really funky and weird. And this movie really kind of ends the series. If they had ended with this movie, it would have been a not satisfying ending, but it would have been an understandable ending. And I think they really did. I think Paramount was just like, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. We are ending it with a Jason that somehow, when exposed to toxic water, toxic waste water,
Below New York
that
City.
yeah, below New York City, which is not something that really was happening in the sewers of New York.
They saw
Toxic waste
Chud
was not
and they thought
flowing.
that was a documentary.
Yeah, but instead of turning him into an even worse monster, it washes all the undead monster away from him and turns him back into a little boy, into a cleaned up little boy.
Yeah, and that's so again, it's the directing where I would assume, and I want to assume this is just the woman seeing that. That's like another
Yeah,
vision. But then the guy is also there and he's looking down. So what's he seeing?
yeah, that's what's the most bizarre thing. And then not only that, but the boy looks like he's alive, and they just leave him there.
Well, you know what's even weirder? Because this scene was even weirder, and you can still find footage of it. There was a shot that they tried to do, but it just looked really weird, where they built his little pumpkin head massive, and they had the boy crawl out of his mouth.
What?
I don't know. It's a metaphor.
Yeah, this movie is such a weird thing. It's trying to be like this continuation of the Tina thing without the psychic abilities. It's trying to end the series in a way because Paramount was just done. Um and because each iteration before this, of course they ended it with like him, being chained to the bottom of the thing, or him being knocked into the water under and being buried underneath debris under the water. At least for the last couple of them, they stopped him. He wasn't necessarily dead, but they stopped him enough to knock him, I guess, you know, out of animation. But this one just seemed to just kind of go, okay, well, we're just going to get rid of him fully, and wash him completely away. Um, and it's just so weird. And we get unmasked Jason again, but this time he looks like crap, like not in an interesting, like good way, like he did in number seven. Yeah, number
Yeah.
seven. That like it's like, where is that? Can we get that old mask again? Can you guys just look at the footage from that movie and recreate that? Why did you have to make it look really, really dumb?
Yeah, it's always the most infuriating part of the Halloween sequels when you watch those
Yeah,
films and you're like,
yeah,
why the hell can't you just make the first mask again?
yeah.
Why do all
Why does
these
the
new
mask keep
masks look
changing?
so weird? And that's the same thing here. Yeah, like part seven is the best Jason's ever looked. This might be the worst he's ever looked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's ridiculous. The decision making that they made with this movie is really, really weird. And there's, don't get me wrong, there's some good moments. The Julius thing, fight on the
Great
top of the
kill.
building,
Great kill.
it is great. That's a great kill. Um, but there's so much more that's just terrible about this movie. It's definitely still worth a watch. Uh,
Yeah.
this whole series is well worth watching just for the goofy fun of it all. Um, but yeah, it's this is such a weird ending to this Paramount era, that it just like you kind of feel like you should have just stopped with number seven and just called it a day at that point. That would have been a good ending for the whole series at that point.
It would have been. It would have been, yeah. But it seems like we're wrapping up on this. Can I just say, like,
Yeah,
just bring up one? Uh,
absolutely.
this was always something that I was, most people find funny, but for some reason, watching it on my own, I found this really infuriating. Jason teleports in this movie, doesn't he? Like,
It does
it's
feel
not
like that.
editing,
Yeah.
it's not directing. I think Jason literally teleports in this movie because there's always the trope, the victim runs away at full sprint, and Jason is only leisurely strolling, and yet he catches up, and it's done to, and it's not quite like Part Six, which Part Six is almost borderline comedy horror, like where
Yeah.
it's a real wink and a nod to the horror tropes. This one is such an infuriating wink where it's like, oh, Jason could just do anything now because, like in the Kelly Hugh death, she looks one way and Jason is on like the right side of the room. She
Right.
turns her head and Jason is on the other side of the room. There is there's no
Yeah.
other way to interpret that other than he teleports because he can't move faster than her head turns.
Yeah. 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 I did catch that this time too. I was like, wait a minute, how many Jasons are there in this place? Um
And I think that infuriated me more than because it could have just been a funny, wink and a nod or whatever. That infuriated me because then the entire chase of the finale, he never does that. He
yeah.
never catches
Although,
up to him.
although he does catch up, here and there in bits. He has like an unerring sense of tracking them. Like he continues to keep up with them in a way that there's absolutely no way that you could catch up with somebody when they're weaving in and out of alleys and shops and everything else. It's like how does he know exactly where they are this whole time?
That is
Oh,
also the other confusing thing. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, like that could be a good finale where it's like, the idea is just, oh, we've got to escape Jason off this boat. And then they're like, oh no, like we could run away, but we've unleashed Jason in New York and he's going around killing everyone. Like, we've got to stop him. But
Right.
instead, for some reason, Jason, yeah, just tracks onto them. And he, aside from those two rapists, like, he's just walking past so many people, just
Oh yeah,
not
he
killing them.
doesn't kill anybody hardly at all in New York. And actually, like the punks get up in his face, and instead of killing them, he just pulls up his mask to scare them with his face. And it's like, what? Like that doesn't seem very Jason to me. Like Jason would just, go on to slaughter whoever was in his way. So it's a very odd choice. It's funny. Don't get me wrong. It's a funny moment, but it's just weird in terms of how we've always seen Jason as this guy who just kills everybody who gets in his way.
Yeah, I mean, massacring everyone in the middle of the street in New York City. Yeah, that would have been impossible to film. But
Sure.
you've got moments like that diner when he goes through the diner, but all he does is throw that one guy. Have him,
Yeah.
have everyone like charge him and him just Julius just punch off like seven heads at once. Just have him kill everyone.
So apparently that guy too, the guy in the diner who he throws off to the side there, and doesn't kill, he just throws him to the side, is King Kurtzinger, who later on becomes Jason in Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, he's a big guy, that
Yeah.
fella.
Oh no, he's huge. Yeah. So, and that's apparently the reason why they ended up going with him instead of Kane Hodder, who was supposed to be Jason in Freddy versus Jason. They ended up going with Ken because he was a much bigger guy, and they wanted to have that size difference between Jason and Freddy. So, and Kane just wasn't as big. So,
An odd
it's
choice, but
yeah,
comparatively,
definitely.
a lot
Yeah.
more odd choices in this film.
Yeah. So, but I mean, again, I think these are fun movies. You
Yeah,
they have fun moments. I think 7 is definitely the better of the two, and I think 8 has some fun moments here and there. It's a slog, just because there are way too many slow moments, way too many exposition moments that don't make any sense. They're trying to do some weird stuff there, and I think it's just to pad the runtime to get them to New York.
yeah. I said it before, but like a lot of these, I've watched this franchise many times, and a lot of the films I can, just throw on and have a really good time. I could do that with Part Seven, but Part
Yeah.
Eight is one of the few entries where I'd recommend watching it with someone else. Like, have a
Right.
laugh.
Right.
Like you said, it's a slog when you're watching it on your own.
Absolutely. All right. Do you have anything else you want to mention about either one of these that we have not talked about?
Um, no big ones. I mean, we didn't mention it, but the amazing um fire stunt in part seven when Kane
Oh,
Hodder
yes.
was on
Yeah.
fire for 40 seconds. It's cut up in the film, so it's not as impressive, but that's one long
Right.
take where he is on fire for almost a minute. And that was a record for
Yeah.
years. No one had ever done anything like that. And he had already been severely burned, like third degree
Yeah.
burns in the past. So he was amazing for doing that again.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great sequence. And like, again, seven has some great moments. It's got uh these great sequences, especially at that end part, that last third act there, that are just some of the most amazing of the franchise, that are just fun and just exciting. Definitely well worth uh the the price of admission at that point. So all right. Well, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and your work?
Cool. Yeah, you set up top the two main podcasts I'm still on. If you want to catch whatever I'm doing, just odds and ends, you can follow me on Twitter at absolute travesty. My two main podcasts, I do ChuckyVision. So we covered all the movies. We've been covering the sci-fi TV show, so season one and two. We're fingers crossed, waiting for that season three renewal, but I don't know if it's happening. But if it doesn't happen, then Don Mancini's always said he's going to do another movie. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll have something in the future to cover on Chucky Vision. We are covering odds and ends, so we're covering like little doll movies. We're watching Megan, so we're going to
Yes.
see Megan in cinemas, and that looks good fun. So we cover.
It was great. I enjoyed it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've been hearing nothing but great things. And then my other podcast, which is it's been on hiatus for a long time, so I don't know when it's coming back. But I did Forever Friday, which was the Friday the 13th movies, like the minute a movie, the movie a minute podcasts. But we didn't want to do 1 minute per episode, so we did 13 minutes per episode. So it took us about 7 hours to cover the first Friday the 13th, and we only got like this was mainly just because my co-host had scheduling issues, and he leads a busy life, and I didn't want to do it with
Right.
anyone else. And we got mostly through part two, but yeah, I don't know. Give them a listen if you really like Friday the 13th. We go into needless detail about those first two films.
Oh yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll definitely have to check that out myself. But yeah, all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
It's been fantastic. It's been a great time.
Thanks again to Dev for joining me. Next episode, Hugh McStay joins me to talk about the wild worlds of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, and Jason X. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more from our TeePublic page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.